I have a lot of things I want to share with you today. And as Brady mentioned, it's been a crazy day for me already because we actually launched our service publicly at 8 a.m. this morning. So what I want to do is I'm going to talk a lot about JavaScript and about bookmarklets, how we do things. Before I get there, I just want to really quick give you a whirlwind tour of what our bookmarklet does. And so basically, I have the bookmarklet here. There's a browser extension here. Anyhow, OK, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to fire up the bookmarklet. And as you can see, what it does is it temporarily changes the behavior of your mouse. And so we're doing actually live I/O on the mouse pointer on top of someone else's page at the moment, which is a tricky thing to do because of all the different event handlers. Now, when you find what you want, you just go ahead and you click on it, and it seemingly lifts it off the page. We've basically almost recompiled all the markup in the CSS into an encapsulated form. You can go ahead and hit save, and that's it. Boom, you're done. Excuse me, you're done. If you go back to your Clipboard homepage, you'll see, OK, I have this clip right here. Now, what's really different about our clips is they preserve the visual look and feel. The hyperlinks will work as you would expect. You can go back to the original source. But we can also grab things that you probably never expected. And I'm not going to spend any time really talking about this, but this is the most extreme example I could think of what we can do that we can clip that no one probably thought that you could. So I can clip literally a Wolfenstein 3D Flash game from another site with that same interface, and now it's actually live right there. So the bookmarklet is actually pretty sophisticated, and it's become an application framework in its own right. Going back to these slides here, wow, this is remarkably awkward. How it's like doing, OK, there we go. Woohoo. It's doing the wrong thing every time. So basically, what we do whenever you fire up the bookmarklet, we have to do a lot of things. We check your login state. We rewrite the page in subtle little ways to make it more clippable. We build out an interactive UI that is responding to all sorts of mouse events, seemingly on every element on the page, but not actually. We have to do a pretty sophisticated analysis of the DOM and the CSS. We give you a preview UI. We transmit the data back. We report back the status. So that's a lot of stuff. There's user interaction. There's plumbing to our back end. And there's also UI that we're trying to control in a hostile environment. And so I want to talk about what the obvious challenges are for this. And there's three that I want to call out that we take advantage of, but are not necessarily particular to our service. If you're trying to do something like what we're doing, you'll face these same challenges. They are effectively, how do you do effective user input? How do you robustly render a UI in that hostile environment? And how do you go about doing secure API calls? We use three different things that are part of the solution, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about each of these. So the first is fast hit detection. There's a naive way of doing this, and I have to preface this by saying, if you're doing hit detection on your own site, it's easy. You put event handlers on individual objects. If you're doing it on someone else's site, you don't want to screw up their event handlers. And so what we did was we put in a global event handler on originally and tried to sniff out the coordinates and actually write our own hit detection algorithm. That worked well to a certain point, but as soon as someone reflowed the page, we would have to reinterrogate the DOM for positions, and it was just not going to work over the long haul. Eventually, and this is the funny thing, eventually I learned about document element from point, and this is the sort of thing that I wish someone had told me about this 5 years ago, because my life would have been much easier. No one on my team had ever heard of this before. We found it accidentally, and it does exactly what you need for this sort of thing. So what you can do is you can ask, OK, what is the element underneath this point? And it will magically tell you, taking consideration z-index and all sorts of other subtleties. Another cool thing about it is that you call this from a document, and if you are hovered on top of an iframe, it will tell you that iframe. If you are allowed to, given the site's security, able to descend into the document of the iframe, you can recursively apply it. And so I didn't show it, but our clipper, I don't know if you're familiar with the composition of Gmail. Gmail is a whole bunch of nested iframes. But we can actually allow you to grab things inside of iframes and pull them out, and they retain all that look and feel. So the second trick is what we think of as CSS sandboxing. And so we came up with a little technique for how do we robustly render our UI on top of someone else's site. And there's really 3 basic steps to this. We programmatically reset in a very aggressive set of reset statements on anything that we're going to compose onto the page. There's also, we have to style our own things with important attribute on all the selectors. And then we've actually had to make a customization to jQuery in order to allow for things like animations. And so this is not meant to be readable, but this gives you a sense of all the different things that we have to lock down for our CSS reset. So it's very different than the typical normalized CSS or reset CSS things that you've seen. That first big block is applied to every element, and then we do some special things for a couple of other things. Now, this isn't a foolproof technique, but the way it works is the following. The original site has their markup, their CSS, and we don't want to break it, right? But we want to render our UI. So the first thing that we do is we apply all the resets inline into our element, so it's really hard for us to inherit anything from the site that would actually make our stuff look wrong. The second thing that we do is really kind of summarized over here with our CSS. So we include our style sheet for how we want to style something, and it's going to be scoped to a very specific ID, and it will have typical typical CSS for making things look pretty, but everything has to have the important flag assigned to it, simply so that you can overrule the inline reset. Right? So again, just kind of recapping this, you have to put the inline style to make sure that you're defeating the site CSS. Then we have to use important on our style sheets to make sure that we're defeating the reset. And then the final thing is well, none of this would work if you were trying to do a standard animation. So you might have noticed we do some nice animations where you're clipping. Well, we had to modify some of the internals. There's a routine called style that all the animation and CSS routines use in jQuery. So we modified that so that we can give it an extra flag that would apply important every time that stuff happens. So in combination, we keep the site the way it is. We can put our stuff up. We can animate and do other things. Third thing, and I think this is the most interesting and what you guys will find the most interesting, is we have to do secure API calls for a couple different reasons, but we're doing it in I think what is a completely different way. Here's the challenge. A lot of things, like if you see like a Facebook like button, that's typically realized as an isolated iframe. And the reason why they do that is because they don't want you to be able to spoof like clicks. All right? Now, our application, our bookmarklet, has to run in the context of the site that you're trying to clip from, so that we can actually inspect all of the DOM and CSS and do the thing that we do, right? And that presents a problem. We're running in the same actual security sandbox as the site itself. We have to be careful not to abuse that power, but we also have to make sure that a malicious third party would not be able to do things that we don't want them to do, like spoof clippings on behalf of users. So what we do is we actually, so this presents all sorts of challenges. I think the key thing is that we really don't want to expose anything that could be kind of like a security leak. So the way we do this is actually kind of multi-step, and I think interesting in its own right. So imagine if you're going to foo.com, we're running through the page, and someone makes the selection, they're clipping something. And the first thing that we do is we use EasyXDM as a way of just transporting that data to our own JavaScript page that we host on the clipboard.com domain. Okay, we just call that XDP, or we've changed the names, but it's for making cross-domain posts, basically. This piece of JavaScript, since it's running in our domain, has access to a shared secret that's stored on client local storage. Now that shared secret is only transmitted once. We do it on registration, and it's stored on client local storage. It's transmitted over HTTPS, and it's important, client local storage instead of cookies, because you don't want it flying over the wire every time you need it. And it's because this bit of JavaScript is running in the clipboard.com domain, it can look at the shared secret. The shared secret then is used to form an HMAC package, which is effectively digitally signing the API call that then goes back to our back end. We do this in as non-blocking a manner as possible, so all the stuff returns as asynchronously as possible. This write for when you're creating a clip returns immediately even before the database has confirmed that it's written. The thing that we return back is effectively a promise token. So in the client, we can pull asynchronously and say, hey, did the save complete? And boop, it did, right? So in combination, we get to sign our API calls when nominally we're kind of running within the security domain of a different site, potentially a hostile site, but we can sign our stuff with a key that no one else ever sees except the user's browser and ourselves. And that's kind of like the secret for how we do that stuff. Now, the final thing that I want to talk about is actually pretty exciting to me. We actually have a way for you to embed Clipboard on your own site, and I think it uses all the technology that I just said, and I think you'll like it. I'm going to go back and, son of a bit, okay, there we go. All right. So I'm going to do a little bit of smoke and mirrors here because I've turned on a browser plugin. It's Tamper Monkey. It's kind of like Grease Monkey to simply simulate what it would be like if IMDb was a partner. They're not, okay? So what the Tamper Monkey script did is it analyzed their page, it added the one line of JavaScript that we required, and it added a single span element to their page, which is shown as our little logo, the heart clip icon. Now then what happens, and that little button can be bounded to a rectangle, it could be bounded to a specific element, it could be bounded to a range of elements very easily. When you hover over it, you get this nice little glowing affordance of what it is, and keep in mind, the developer or the publisher specifies what that region is, and then when the user wants to clip it, they go like that, okay? And then boom, we now have a WYSIWYG clip of that unit right there. Not a crappy little photo, but really something that's quite actionable. And I can go ahead and save this, and now you can start saving things from across the web. If you wanted to, you can also bring up something of a light box of that user's clips right on top, and it becomes actionable there. You could take a look at other popular clips from IMDb. But anyhow, this is stuff that a lot of people have been asking us for, and we're really happy to make it available today. But if you register for Clipboard.com and you simply go to the Tools section, you will find we now have a little wizard for making that embedded clipper. And here's another little example showing of how that works. Again, it's really nice and slick. If you want to really make it easy for people to take pieces of content that you want them to share, that's how you do it. The wizard is you pick what you want your button to look like. You add a jQuery selector for the element that it's going to be bound to. Maybe it's going to be bound to a range of elements that begin with foo and end with bar. You hit generate, and then boom, you get the little JavaScript line right there, and you get the span that you have to include. So easy as pie. Wrapping up here, so again, just to recap, you include our embed script, you add the div, it's span now, we just changed it since last night, and then, who knows, then profit, right? So go to the tools thing and find out more. Again, it's incredibly easy, just one line of JavaScript, one line of extra markup. There's a couple of other things that you can do from styling it, and then, and we hope you give it a try. To wrap this up, Bookmarklets has been around, I think, almost 10 years, but they've always been kind of like in this never land of the web developer's toolkit. I think now the way JavaScript engines have really kind of ramped up in their capability, it's feasible to do really interesting things in the context of a bookmarklet. You can do things that look a lot more like an application. And there's a ton of gotchas. The security models, I think we're going to have to actually rethink them a little bit because we're violating them to a certain extent. But the really interesting thing is, and what we're truly aspiring to do is, we think some of the best web scenarios that are possible are when you can mash up things from two different services in some way. And our simple litmus test for whether we were succeeding or not was, could you take two search results from two different search engines and present them in one place? And that's something that can only be done kind of across the web if you do something that executes broadly like that. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your patience, and I hope you give Clipboard a try. Thanks.